Welcome to Live True. This is Terry Lynn. This is the third in my series of my water series podcast. And today I have with me Marie Aichagui, if I've said that correctly. She lives in France. And we've just made acquaintances recently through Mark Burr. And I wanted to meet with you today and discuss primary water, because you're doing the primary water investigations out there in France. Or you tell me exactly where you're doing it out there. And you're brand new to this. So you have done some investigations recently, and we want to know how you came into this new field and what you found.
Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really honored for that. So my background is engineering physics. I have a degree in engineering physics from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, because I'm Swedish, Swedish half Moroccan, but I grew up in Sweden. And I also have an engineering degree from École Centrale Paris, which is a French engineering school. So I studied applied physics, and I specialized in technical acoustics. I also started to work in research, in acoustics research for Airbus. And my master thesis and later research field there was, so it was in acoustics, and I was using the same models, the same equations as they use for surveying for oil. And so when I started reading about primary water, and I understood that it's water that is far beyond the surface of the earth, I remember telling my husband immediately that first, I have to work with this, and second, this would give sense to everything I've done in the industry so far. And my studies, where it was interesting, but I wasn't passionate about it. And here was a field that was, I really felt it was a calling, and I had to work with it. I had to give access to this water to everyone who wants it. And I immediately saw the link between finding that water and what I had done so far in technical acoustics.
How did what you were learning and doing professionally guide you and help you into understanding pretty quickly about primary water?
I guess it's also about questioning basically everything, since what we learn in school and in university is about the water cycle, which is only on the surface, and uh, let's say a kilometer below the surface of the earth. But looking at springs, very often I felt, how does this all make sense? And it's strange given the models that I've learned in school. Uh, you know, something's missing. And for instance, when you find a spring on high altitude, and it's an area where there are no glaciers, but the spring has the same flow all year round, no matter if it rains or not. It just doesn't make sense with the classical, with the conventional hydrological cycle model. It doesn't make sense, because where does the water come from? But learning about primary water, it was a revelation, because it all made sense. So I understood, okay, this is where the water comes from. And it was like a puzzle where you put the last piece in and you see the whole picture, and it just appears clearly to you.
How did you first hear about it?
It was through a magazine. It's one of very few really independent magazines. So there are no commercials. So they're totally independent. They can write what they want as long as it's sourced. So this magazine is called Nexus, a French magazine, and there was an article series about primary water.
Did you have to make any leaps from your traditional education to now looking at things differently, or did all the pieces fit perfectly, or did you have to reject some of the things that you were had learned traditionally?
No, I don't have to reject anything that I've learned traditionally, except from the world view. But for me, real science is always questioning what you've learned, always, and always being open to new models and new findings, new discoveries, and even making those discoveries and telling about them, explaining about them. And then if something seems wrong, then you have to question it. Even if you were the one who was telling about that, if someone finds a better model, then of course I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought
That's how
that up.
science works.
Yes, because this whole idea of the science is subtle, that's the
No,
opposite of what science is exactly. So I don't understand this traditional science, new age science, or alternative science. I don't really get that because it's just simply a process how we come to
exactly.
conclusions,
Yeah, it's a
right? Yeah.
mindset, being open and
Mm.
always questioning and finding proof.
Finding proof and
Uh,
evidence.
yeah.
Honestly, I don't know of any other woman that is doing the surveying that's really involved like you are. Do you?
No.
Yeah. I think I think maybe you're starting I think you're pioneering this because you are surveying, so that's what I understand
Yeah,
you're doing now, and you're doing it in France, correct?
yeah, I do that in France. Now I have a request from Spain, northern Spain. I also got a lead in Canada, but I guess that the surveying would be done by Mark's team. So yeah, I'm doing surveys in France.
And how did you learn how to do that? Who taught you?
That was Mark. So and it was really funny the way I met Mark. Um, it was a couple of weeks after I learned about primary water, and I was in this. I have to work with this, and I just made a Google search with the keywords primary water, and I found his company, and I wrote him an email. The email that it was on the website, and he answered. I think it was within the hour, and I remember it was a Wednesday because in France, children don't go to school on Wednesdays, so it was a Wednesday, and he answered immediately. And my proposal for him was to be his partner for primary water in France, and for France and Europe. And he said it's unbelievable. What a synchronicity. I'm traveling to Spain in 2 days, so I could come visit you because I'm living right on the border to Spain, in France. So I think it was on the Saturday, so 3 days later, he was here. We met my family, we had lunch together, and got to know each other. And he came with his equipment, and I remember being really surprised because it all fitted within a backpack. And I imagined that the equipment for serving this kind of service would be, much bulkier and heavier. But so he showed in my garden how to survey. He made a small demo in my garden. Uh, so for me, that was also discovering that okay, this is really feasible. I mean, it's something that I could physically do. Um, and So that was end of October, I think, and right before Christmas, I told him that now I've reorganized my schedule, so in January I'm ready to start working with this. And the first survey was so I started building the website for Europe, and then started to communicate. But I haven't done much communication because people actually found me. They found me and contacted me through the website. Yeah, so that was also a sign for me that the time is right. Uh, and the first survey took place in May, so less than a year from the time when I first learned about primary water.
Now, when they locate you or they find you, do they know specifically they are looking for primary water, or are they just looking for somebody to survey the property for, let's say, groundwater, and they don't really understand the difference? Or are they
No,
fully
they know
educated?
it's primary water because the people who contact me have often seen some video about primary water. Very often they talk about pal power. So they have a basic understanding about primary water, and it makes sense to them. Uh, and they wanna, they just think that it's something. Yeah, it just makes sense, and they have this sense that, of course, this is the water we should search for to drill a well.
So that's telling me that it's becoming more well known and more popular,
Yeah,
and that's a really good sign because I don't know.
yeah, word is getting out.
Yeah, it sure is. Had
Yeah.
you, when Mark showed up with the backpack and the equipment there, had you already researched and seen some of the old equipment that they used to use?
No, Mark has shown me pictures of. I think he found one of those recently, and on Amazon or something, and he bought it as a historic piece.
Yeah, he did. The
Yeah.
power, even the power source back then was, a big, huge battery, and you don't even need. I think that one that he bought is actually usable, but you don't need the big power source. It's different.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what the challenges are, if any. There must be some out there. And are you pretty much the first one?
I was contacted by a German guy who works. I believe he works with. I mean, he's also looking for primary water, uh, and he doesn't use the gamma scintillation counter. I believe the way he works, like the first step to scan the property, is I think it's more like Dowser's work. Um, and then the second step, I believe it's very similar to how we work with acoustic resonance technologies. But I don't know exactly where they work geographically, because he also talked about Africa, and so we're not the only one, which feels really good because I guess it's a good sign to have competition. It shows that there is a market and that it works, and it gives more dynamic to the whole business. But in France, I'm the only one doing this, definitely.
So tell me about doing the surveying in France and in that area out there. I know you had mentioned that there was one other person who was doing the surveying, and how that's a good thing to have that kind of competition because it shows that there's a market. But what kind of challenges, I guess, if any, have you faced? Because it's still kind of new out there. It's even if it's just you and one other person.
Yeah, so the challenges are, first, explaining to people that uh, there is a whole other geological model compared to the one that people learn about conventionally. Uh, so there is one of the challenges is the understanding, even though it's completely logic to to accept that there is, to accept another geological model, that the conventional one saying that there is only the water cycle that is on the surface and we always recycle the water, because the geological model saying that water is produced all the time within the earth is, it's it's the only model that I've found that that is coherent with observations. But to bring people to, maybe it's a question of them daring to question an old model and daring thinking for themselves to uh, to accept that another model can be more real, closer to reality. I guess there's a psychological factor there about actually, just mm, having the confidence to think for yourself and to believe that you are clever enough to draw your own conclusions. Um, so that's a challenge. And the other challenge is to find a driller because they're overbooked. In France, many drillers had to shut down their businesses because uh, they have added a lot of administrative hurdles. So quite a lot of drillers decided to close down in the last years. Um, and there are also lots of rumors saying that you're not allowed to use the water on your property, uh, even though the law says that you can. I mean, it clearly says that you can. So I guess fear is also interfering with um, people wanting to drill their well. But then there are lots of people who with whom it's completely fluid, and they decide to drill a well, so they contact me, and very quickly I'm on their property doing a survey, and you know then they just try to get in touch with that driller, and it's gonna happen. So for some, I guess it's very much about mindsets, like with most things in life.
I agree. When you're talking about the thinking for yourself, I think when we're trying to present a new idea, especially one that's rather large, like the water cycle, that means for people, if they accept that, is that that's going to they already believe in, that they already have live their life in accordance with, right? So it's kind of a little bit
Yeah,
of a cognitive dissonance. So
yeah,
it's an unwillingness and an inability to accept a new idea because that's going to change this, that, and the other thing. And then I have to
yeah,
change this and it's going to mean
mm,
this. So I think that's
yeah,
where the resistance and fear comes
yeah,
in
yeah. It's a
automatically.
complete paradigm shift,
Mm-hmm.
because people
Yeah.
have been taught that there is water scarcity, and
Yeah.
because of that believed water scarcity, uh, they will judge different situations in a certain way, and those judgments, like it's bad to uh, I don't know, it's bad to water a garden because it's a waste of the drinking water, and that becomes like habits. So yeah, it's like you say, once they get out of this paradigm of water scarcity and they get into the paradigm of water abundance, uh, all those habits that are based on that paradigm had to change, and they have constructed their lives around those habits.
And they believe it because once you have a belief of something, and we all have to have beliefs of things, we have to um, take some things for granted, that are
Yeah,
true. And so once we believe something, we're going to see all kinds of evidence that that's true. And so
yeah,
when a different idea is presented to us as opposite of that, or just seems so far fetched, It's very hard to accept, because all in our mind automatically we start thinking, well, yeah, but what about this and this? That can't be true. And so it's an indoctrination
Yeah.
that's happened. Yeah. So, and you mentioned you're having all kinds of different clients come in on the spectrum, and those that are more informed and more open-minded, and those that are just, it's going to take them a little while, to get there. But I'm happy to hear you say that there's people that are actually finding you, and it doesn't sound like you're having a hard time finding the clients and getting the projects. So that's good to know that that's happening out there.
Yeah.
Tell me about the laws. You mentioned that there are some laws that are prohibiting people from using the water on their property or something.
Yeah, well then, I can't tell you if it's laws or because I'm really not an expert on law, but what I've understood is that there's the law that says that uh, if you have a property, uh, you can use the water that is on your property and in the underground of your property. That's clearly stated. And then there are, maybe it's called decrees. Uh, it's, I don't know if it's on the same level, legal level as a law, but no, it's some legal construct that restricts that right in certain areas. And also, there are, let's say, legal constructs, not to say anything that is not true, um, that that will prevent people from drilling. So even though you have the right to use the water that is on your property, you might not be allowed to drill to get there. So that there is one region in France that is where you're not allowed to drill for anything since the beginning of this year, because it's been classified like a dry area, uh, or an area where there is drought. Uh, so you're not allowed to drill for any well, even if it's just 10 meters or very shallow. And the reason they give is that uh, they want to prevent people from stealing the water in that aquifer, which they say is 700 meters deep. So I guess that's 2,000 feet deep. So for me, just it doesn't make sense at all. It all evolves around water scarcity, and this idea of, if someone uses water, even if it's for drinking, uh, they're stealing the water from someone else.
The scarcity mindset is prevailing all over with food, with land.
Yeah.
They're putting that scare tactic into all of us, that there's so many people that, so that's not a new concept. I'm not surprised that they're using that. Now, a decree, though, I don't think a decree is a law. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with what we have here in the States of a mandate. It's or could be a little stronger than that, but it's not something that's passed legislation, I don't believe. I think it's one of those words that they kind of use, that they try to strike fear in you that it's actually a
Yes.
law when it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And Lucy too. Yeah.
Hmm. But so far you haven't had a problem well, you don't do the drilling, but you're
No, I
doing
don't
the
do the
surveying,
drilling, and
right?
I have a client who's really chasing drillers right now, but she hasn't found one yet. But remember, I told you before we started recording that in France, during summer, July, August, it's very difficult to get anything done because most people are on holidays, and so I believe now that everyone is back to business. Uh, I I'm confident she'll find a driller and that she will be able to drill a well.
So how many surveys have you done approximately? And have you found faults, primary water every time?
Yeah, I've done 4 surveys so far, and I'm surprised every time because there is water everywhere, and I find faults that I strongly believe are primary water faults everywhere. Even on a property where after the mapping study that I do before to see if there are good conditions in that area, given the geology and known uh, like based on drill logs and public information. I first see if there are good indicators that we can find primary water, and then in that area, I told the client that um, we can come, but given the small size of your property and the geology, I'm not, chances aren't that great. Um, but so we went anyway because he really wanted us to come, and yeah, we found really interesting structures in the underground, and so it's as I said, first we sort of scan the whole surface of the property with this gamma scintillation counter, and where the value drops, uh, it indicates that the gamma radiation has been absorbed by water, by large amounts of water. We draw a line between spots with low gamma values. And on those lines, so it's 50 meters lines, let's say, and on that line, we look uh, with acoustic resonance technology what the structure of the underground is like, and it shows cross sections. So with data processing, uh, we make cross sections of the underground up to 400, or we can do 600 meters deep, and we can see what the hardness is like in the underground. And what we find is uh, vertical structures where it's soft, and where it's soft, it means that water can go in, and um, or water can seep in where the underground structure is softer than the rest of the underground. So with those mappings, where those soft structures, um, um, where the soft structure is on the same spot as the low gamma value, there is water, and that's where we recommend people to drill. That's the spot where they should drill, because then we have 2 indicators of the presence of water.
Okay. I never thought of it till just now to this extreme of how it must be just a whole nother world under there as far as the rocks and the
Yeah,
crevices and the open spots and where the water might run through. You think
yeah,
about that under the ocean. I should say in the ocean, because you can kind of see that, but it's kind of the same thing under the earth. It's a
yeah,
whole nother world, down
yeah,
there, and you can kind of get a glimpse of that by some of that equipment. So it just kind of hit me now. Yeah.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so are you working alone when you're doing the surveying out there? Or you have
No, I'm
a
working with
partner?
yeah, I have Federico Pellegrini, who is the Italian geophysicist that I work with. Yeah. And
Okay.
he knows Mark for, I don't know for how long, but he knew Mark long before I knew him.
All right. I heard
Mm,
Spain is pretty tough as far as their laws. We have
yeah.
a friend of ours, or acquaintance that's on our thread with you and I, Inge. I'm not sure how to
Yes.
say her name. Yeah. She's having some issues in Spain with the
Mm,
laws
mm.
for drilling and such. So are you finding that that's harder for people
I
to
guess
get?
I guess it's harder in Spain than in France.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I heard
Uh,
that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There seem to be even more hurdles in France for people to drill their wells.
Hmm. So what do you
But
think the answer is?
I think first thing is to get out of fear, like for most things. Uh, get out of this fear mind. It's not really a mindset, but it's like fear hits you sometimes, and getting out of that in order to see clearly how you can argue for your right to drill a well, and uh, to understand the difference between the law and those decrees. Um, because what I find is that many people who contact me uh, are aware of the fact that authorities try to instill fear in everyone. I guess that knowing that there is someone who wants you to live in fear can make fear so present in your life that you see threats everywhere. Trying to like cleanse yourself from fear, see clearly what road can you choose in order to drill your well, and what rights do you actually have to use the water that is on your property, and defend that right instead of trying um, to face different challenges that people will put on your way. Defend the right that you have to use the water on your property. Defend the right you have to have good quality water, to access good quality water.
I think one of the biggest things that can dispel fear is having the proper information. So we were just talking about the two words of laws and mandates and decrees.
Yeah.
So we've been misinformed, and we've also been indoctrinated to believe certain things are true. And so if we just get the correct information, that right there can help dispel a lot of that fear, because a lot of the fear is just based on false information, or
Yes, it
people know
is.
that, yeah, false evidence appearing real, right? So once we
Yeah.
know, oh yeah, that's not a thing, that's not real, that's not true,
Yeah.
then fear can be dispelled. And then there's the fear that we have that the unprocessed traumas and that are inside of us, of that we have to work on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. But another very concrete thing people can do while drilling their wells is to make sure to cap it correctly, because then uh, they can prove that they're not stealing any water, that the water they take comes from the underground, and if it goes through an aquifer, they can prove that there is no water seeping in from uh, a groundwater aquifer. So that's a very physical proof that they're not taking the water that runs through someone else's property to sip into their well. They can prove it. It doesn't come from the sides. It comes from below.
I can see that's been proven when I talked to Davina Cox. I don't know if you saw the interview, but she talked about a time or two when they proved that it was not coming from the aquifers. So yeah, that might be, a tactic too, is just, show the proof, because people
Yeah,
don't have the right information, and you can see how they would think that
yeah,
it's coming from an aquifer, and the aquifers are only have so much, because it's
yeah,
hydrological cycle, so
yeah,
uh, yeah. So people, men and women, finding out who they are and what you mentioned their rights, that
yeah,
they have rights to property. They have rights.
yeah,
Water is their property.
yeah. And another
So,
way to go
mhm,
about it is to choose the right words and the right semantic. Uh,
mhm.
and what I do, I don't say that people have lied to you and what you learned in school was a lie. You don't need to do that. No,
Mhm.
it's totally unnecessary, because it splits people. It will polarize
Yeah.
people between those who believe in conventional things and other people who are often called conspiracy theorists these days.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't need to go down that road. Um, I like to talk about primary water in very neutral scientific terms, and
Uh-huh.
just talk about evidence, talk about observations, talk about how we work, the procedures, the processes, our methodology, but find this very neutral scientific vocabulary and use that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have to go into politics. You don't have to talk about politics. You don't have to talk about belief systems. And also talk about what people find in other industries. I was talking to a friend who started his career in petrochemical, like oil exploration, oil surveying, back in the 80s, 1980s. And we were talking about really deep drills. And he told me that in that industry, everyone knows that the deeper you drill, the more water there will be. But in the oil industry, water is an annoyance.
Sure.
But they just, they just observe. They just, they just observe. Every time they drill, there is lots of water in the underground. And the way he said it was so natural that for me, who's into water and who wants to know everything about water and all the evidence that there is for water being deep in the underground, I was really surprised because for him it was so natural that of course there is water in the underground, but they just don't. They will only try to find ways to evacuate the water. And I think in that industry, they won't ask themselves, where does the water come from? Because it's not their interest.
Mm-hmm.
But that's an interesting proof for me that there is lots of water in the underground.
And with water, it's easy to not have to make it controversial because you're not trying to disprove that there isn't groundwater. There is groundwater. That's true. It's there. It's a hydrological cycle.
Sure.
And you can also say, and
yes,
did you know that there's also water deep underneath that also?
Yes.
And that's just adding on kind of to what they already know to be true. And and then their first thought is, well, I wonder why I never knew that. Well, it's because then water scarcity can't be a thing, and you don't have, doesn't have to be a big controversy. It's just people know that other humans, want control and they want power, and it involves money and all of that. So that's kind of, we just all kind of know we do that, or at least those that don't have the greatest agendas. So water is pretty easy to talk with people about. They're very readily ready to accept that there's water actually below what we're used to hearing about.
Many people think that water cannot be produced. Like there is no reaction on Earth that can produce water. But just look at hydrogen technology, where hydrogen technology is based on hydrogen reacting with oxygen. It reacts together in a reaction that produces water and heat, which is being used in that industry. And most people have studied those chemical reactions in school. They have only forgotten about them. And there are so many chemical reactions. You can Google it. You can Google hydrogen technology. You'll immediately find, chemical reactions. H2 plus O gives H2O. It's as simple as that, and it's out there. It's no secret.
It's not hard to prove. It's not one of those real controversial, super controversial subjects. There's much more controversial subjects than primary water. That's for sure. So, yeah, it's
all the information is there, and but this belief is also out there. This false belief that water cannot be produced, which is absolutely wrong, because there are so many chemical reactions producing water. But you just don't think about it. Because again, in hydrogen technology, you don't want the water. So people won't look at that. just like in mining industry, you don't want the water. So when there is water, people would just they will consider it as a waste product.
Mm-hmm. There's so much that we aren't aware of that is real. And there's also things that aren't measurable that are real. And just because you can't measure it with scientific equipment that we have available today does not make it not real.
No, it just
So, like,
means
for
that you
instance,
have to do new findings in science.
yeah, like dowsing, how do you prove that's a thing and that works? Well, it's only by the evidence at this point. But so there's a lot of layers, a lot of levels to what is real that
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
we haven't been taught, and that's for a reason too.
Yeah.
So
And
open-mindedness.
nothing is in contradiction with science. If something is, science has to broaden itself, and there needs to be a new field of science to embrace that, which looked like a controversy, because it just means that the science isn't developed enough.
Mm-hmm. I heard an interesting definition of science, and I wish I could remember it exactly. It made a lot of sense that basically what we've been talking about, but I wish I could add to it. But it was something to the effect of that there's no such thing as science. All we're doing is we're continually finding evidence and testing it out, finding evidence and testing it out, finding evidence, and we just keep doing that. That's all and then as we keep finding more evidence and testing it out, we just keep honing in on what is real and what is true. So there's never a conclusion ever, to anything. So I think that applies here too. Who knows what the possibilities are? Who knows what's underneath the earth? Really, who knows?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish you the best out there. I know we're going to keep in touch. And I think we're going to have another talk with you with Mark, because he'll have all kinds of questions. And I think he wants to also meet with you and myself after he gets back to Europe. I think he's coming back there and is going to do a project or two with you, from what I understand. And we'll get some results, from that.
Yeah. Yes, so the website is primaire.com. So it's
what is it?
Eau primaire, which means primary water in French.
Okay.
It's spelled
Spell that?
EAUPRIMAIRE.com.
Okay, so then I'll put that website on the screen and also down below where people can get a hold of you. And we'll look forward to hearing you tell us your results from when people actually drilled from your survey. So I wish you the best, Marie.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you for meeting with me today.
Thanks for having me on your show.